Our topic for our presentation is how caste plays a role in manual scavenging. And for our podcast, we had invited a photographer and an activist named Palani Kumar from Madurai. He has been working in this field for almost 2 years and he is interested in capturing societal issues like manual scavenging, Dalit issues, and women's related issues. He's also a member of the People's Archive for Rural India, which is a digital journalism platform. And his work and his pictures have been used in the documentary film called Kakkus, which means toilet in Tamil.
We asked him a lot of questions related to the nature of the work that managed scavengers are supposed to do, their working hours and conditions, implementation of the prevalent legislation banning this practice, and the role of corporations and governments in funding and perpetuating it. Most importantly, the role of caste, the arguably social and religious practice, and how it played a role in their plight. So he told us that contrary to the popular conception, scavenging waste doesn't just include excretory matter but also other industrialized waste like sans napkins, diapers, etc. that are also found in public toilets by hand because they're not provided any equipment by their employers. They make makeshift equipments which make it difficult for them to breathe. So, also with advancement of industrialization, instead of emancipation came a possible exposure to a whole new category of diseases.
So I would also like to add that these India is getting developed in under Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. We are building toilets everywhere, but we are not teaching everybody how to use it, and these people bear the consequence of that.
But I would also like to add that though it's a societal problem because caste is ingrained in people's minds and it's taught to them from when they're children. For example, school children are asked to clean toilets by the teachers itself. And this is an integral part of a society. And if this is a state of affairs, then there is change in our society is very hard.
Yeah, and earlier these people were, hired by government directly, but now they are hired through private organization and firm. So they are hired on a contractual basis. Their pay is very restricted. Sometimes they earn 8,000 or less per month, and they also have to bear the expense of traveling from one place to another, and they have to pay for it from their own pockets. And because of the contractual hiring, they have like close to less bargaining power, and like they actually don't have any option. They cannot object on the pay, and like it creates an environment of forced labor for them, and it is violating article 23 under UDHR, which is everyone's right to free choice of employment, and also article 90, our constitution's article 19 subclause G, which is also our right to practice any profession of our choice.
Women's rights is also an important aspect as intersectionality compounds these issues. So they have to travel by these tricycles, which are harmful for, like, they put pressure on women's stomachs, and that causes like uterine problems. And there's also this, they have to bear the travel expenses themselves. They have to pay commission on the any valuables that they got from the garbage to the employers. And on death from the multiple unidentifiable causes like from drug addiction or alcoholism, the NGOs and other organizations have to work so hard to procure any kind of compensation for them. So the widows usually think of it as a symbolic or a sanctimonious payment, and they don't really spend it, so they also usually go in that manual labor job.
So this particular issue forms a part of their caste identity because, as Isha mentioned, the widows don't have any other job opportunities, so they get back into this job, and even the children follow their mothers, and this goes on from one generation to another, and it forms a part of descent-based discrimination. And the acts, the most prevalent acts in India for manual scavenging, there are two of them, which are the 1993 Act, which is the Employment of Manual Scavengers and Construction Prohibition Act, and the other is the Prohibition of Employment of Manual Scavengers and the Rehabilitation Act. of 2013, but none of these acts are implemented, and even nobody has been punished under these acts. And even if they are punished, the punishment is very less, because it is either a fine of 2,000 rupees or a jail time of 1 year, which is very less.
This is also like we can also say that people are not aware about their fundamental rights as well. Like Article 17 abolishes untouchability, but these people who try to create a sanitary and clean environment for us, we look down on them and create a very negative environment for them. We do not treat them equally. And also, because of the contractual thing, Article 23, these people are kind of forced into it because the society has created a particular area for them, that these caste people are supposed to work for it, which kind of push them into arena of forced labor.
While I understand that, Manasvi, that there are some constitutional aspects that are violated, but that happens every day. What do you think is the role of political reality in their treatment and how it influences and gets influenced by manual scavenging?
I personally think politics plays a huge role when it comes to caste-based discrimination and especially manual scavenging. Taking help from the B.R. Ambedkar reading Annihilation of Caste, he talks about how politics should include social reform, but and if there is no inclusion of social reform, then politics is useless. And for a civilized society to exist, there should be a division of labor, but then in our country it is a division of laborers into watertight compartments, and we grade them in hierarchies, one above the other. So this leads to individuality being a myth in our society, and a person is judged based on which group they form a part of instead of their own individual talent or skill and ability.
So basically, negative nepotism, we can call it. So, like,
Yeah.
also, like, with caste, religion, and politics plays a very important role. Like Isha says, like in India, there nobody cares if your human rights are violated. These political parties, even ruling or the opposite parties, they only pay attention when these human rights will satisfy the agenda, or elections are near, or they need to degrade the other party. Like in the Hathras rape case, Rahul Gandhi got involved. In this case, he fought with media, the police, and everybody to enter that village, but he still hasn't commented about the Tomar murder case that happened in Delhi, because a Muslim guy killed her there. An upper caste man raped a lower caste woman, so he was there, but not there.
I agree with both of you that human rights violation is only considered an important matter if it's on the agenda of the parties in power, and other matters if they are taken as level exhibitionism. But while that is true, I think it goes deeper than that. I think politics and religion are so intertwined these days, and Hindu society, uh, which is itself a myth, is also a huge plays a huge role in this. So, like Ambedkar said, we have a huge caste consciousness. We don't have a kind of unity or fellow feeling for Hindus, and that in group cohesion is not there. So we have this kind of indifferentism that prevails in our society, which makes it impossible to gain any kind of organization on any united front, or even like gain visibility for these causes, because everyone is so entrapped in their closed off communities, their castes.
Exactly. Domestically, caste takes a position in opposition to the dominant religion of Hinduism, and it becomes difficult to address the situation, so that Dalits take resource to the international system of human rights. But in a manner, our Indian government restrict that also. Indian government is busy taking pride in being a secular state and and the largest democracy in the world. So because of all these things, they try to prevent themselves and do everything in their power to shield themselves from the international scrutiny on caste discrimination.
I
I,
agree with this, but even then, like looking towards the international community for help is also problematic, because caste discrimination was first recognized only in the year 1996, when the fight for it has been going on since the 1980s. And we can say that human rights is somewhat a westernized idea, because um, and caste, they are somewhat similar in the sense that both are a stratification of the society, and people from the lower strata are judged and they are discriminated against. But racial discrimination was recognized way before caste discrimination was, though both fall under the problem of descent based discrimination. And this also is a
I
problem because um, uh, taking example of the savage the savages here are obviously the government, the Indian society, and the private corporations. The victims are the Dalits, and we look towards and the white people to be our saviors, and it is expected of them to be saviors.
I
So you're
agree with
mute.
Archana that how the saviors, we consider them to be saviors, but how their role as saviors is more formalistic and it's ineffective in a way. Also, the years of transnational activism that prevailed in Dalit circles internationally finally gave way when in 1996 the Third Committee recognized dissent to include caste discrimination, but that also happened after adopting various westernized frameworks and terminology to try and relate to them and try, even though the international bodies claim to be universal and non-western and ahistoric, it still requires these kind of frameworks to be adapted by indigenous eastern people like Lakshmi Berwa in the president of Vision in the subcommittee meeting of human rights. She said that the humiliation and terror faced by Dalits can be compared to the Holocaust and what Jews faced during that. So it does require that kind of frameworks. I agree.
And we, like as Isha you said, we have been ignoring any recommendation that has been made to us by CERT, and we have been lacking on our uh, periodic reports. How in the 61st session in 2002, CERT recommended that discrimination based on descent includes discrimination against member of community based on forms of social stratification such as caste and analogous system of inherited status, which nullify or impair their equal enjoyment of human right. Despite this, India has consistently said that caste cannot be equated with race or covered under descent, which is completely false. It is what exactly caste stands for. And the last periodic report submitted by India was in year 2008. There has and they also denied that they won't give any information in the periodic reports regarding the SC and STs of India. So they have been lacking behind for 2 years. And the other recommendation made by the committee was, first of all, that all Dalits, irrespective of their religion, should be given benefits, but uh, there was a 1950 presidential order which said exactly like caste-based entitlement for Dalits has to be there. They and like in 1983 Suzai versus Union of India case, it was considered that caste continues to exist even after conversion. They were tone deaf to the recommendation made by Sir. And again, they did that again when Sir asked them to make move the reservations for benefits in private sector only. They did not pay any attention to it. They did not do anything about it. These things have been century old in India. It has been there for a long time. And another one more thing they did, what if India is being tone deaf to everything they were saying, they asked to add a declaration to article 14, under article 14, which says, which will give permission to the Dalits, aggrieved Dalits, individual aggrieved Dalits, to directly upload cert. But India, being a very proud state, did not pay attention to it and ignored it completely.
Yeah, this is true. But the problem here is, I think this is like a criticism of how international human rights works, because these international institutions and the community doesn't have the power to implement sanctions on countries that are not following these recommendations, because these are just they are mere recommendations and they're not orders. Unlike the World Trade Organization that can impose economic sanctions on countries, human rights institutions cannot do so.
So that concludes our presentation. Thank you, professors.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, professors.